Nobody saw it coming. A group of kids from Gary, Indiana were about to flip the music world upside down. And right in the middle of it all was an 11-year-old named Michael Jackson, dancing and singing like his life depended on it. This wasn't just talent. This was history in the making. So how did the world meet Michael Jackson in 1969? And why did everything change after that? Let's go back to where it all began. 1969 wasn't just another year in music. It was the year the world met the future king of pop, even if they didn't know it yet. The Jackson 5 had just stepped into the spotlight, but it was Michael who stole it. With that unforgettable voice, those moves way beyond his age, and a stage presence that felt almost supernatural, Michael Jackson made the world stop and watch. But what was really going on behind those wide eyes and that dazzling smile? What did the press say? And what did it feel like to witness the birth of a legend in real time? Let's dive into Michael Jackson in 1969, the year the world met the Jackson 5. The Jackson 5 didn't just debut in 1969, they exploded. That year they signed with Motown Records, the legendary label that had already given us names like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and Diana Ross. But this was different. The Jackson 5 weren't just another act, they were a full-blown phenomenon. In October 1969, they dropped their very first single, I Want You Back. That song? It wasn't just a hit, it was a tidal wave. It climbed straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, knocking out big names and surprising the entire industry. This wasn't normal. A group of kids from a working-class family with no celebrity parents, no industry connections, suddenly sitting at the top of the charts? It was unheard of. By December, their first album, Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5, was released. That's right, Diana Ross. She introduced them to the world as if she was passing the torch. The TV appearances began rolling in. Their performance on The Ed Sullivan Show was a game changer. If you ask people who were alive at the time, they'll tell you. When the Jackson 5 hit the screen, the energy in the room changed. And Michael? He wasn't just the lead singer, he was the lightning rod. With his perfect timing, charisma, and raw emotion, Michael was already outshining performers twice his age. And he wasn't even a teenager yet. By the end of 1969, the Jackson 5 weren't just a rising act, they were the act. Magazine covers, screaming fans, sold-out shows, it was happening fast. And at the heart of it all was Michael. And as the spotlight grew hotter, so did the pressure behind the scenes. While the world was falling in love with the Jackson 5, behind the cameras, it wasn't all smiles and glitter. Michael was just 11 years old, but his life wasn't like other kids. There were no lazy weekends or after-school hangouts. There was only one thing: rehearsal. Day after day, hour after hour, drilled by their father, Joe Jackson, whose strict rules and fierce discipline kept the group sharp, but came at a price. Michael once said that even when other kids were outside playing, he was inside practicing, sweating under stage lights. Joe wasn't just a manager, he was a machine, pushing the boys constantly to be perfect, especially Michael. Because even back then, it was clear, Michael was the star. At Motown, things looked polished. The label marketed them as the ultimate family act. Berry Gordy paired them with top songwriters and choreographers. He knew Michael had something special. He even compared him to a young James Brown. But inside Motown's tight control, the Jacksons had very little say. Songs, image, schedule, everything was dictated from the top. Michael wasn't just a kid following instructions. He was already studying the greats and shaping himself to one day surpass them. And the crazy part? He was just getting started. The reaction from fans in 1969 was explosive. It was like Beatlemania all over again. But this time, it was 5 black kids bringing the noise. Teen magazines went wild. Girls were fainting at concerts. TV ratings spiked whenever the Jackson 5 appeared. And remember, this was before social media. Everything spread through TV, magazines, word of mouth, and yet they were everywhere. Michael became the clear favorite. Reporters would show up for group interviews and end up only talking to him. He had that charm, soft-spoken but confident, polite but powerful. People couldn't look away. Even in a year filled with breakthroughs and headlines, There were a few special moments in 1969 that most people never saw, or simply forgot. First, one rare clip shows the Jackson 5 rehearsing in a small room with just a couple of mics and some basic instruments. No crowd, no screaming fans, just raw talent. And you can see it. Even in rehearsal, Michael gave it his all. Every move had energy. Every note had intention. Another fun fact, Michael was obsessed with cartoons and comic books. In the middle of crazy rehearsals and performances, he still found time to draw characters and imagine other worlds. This creative side would later show up in his music videos, short films, and stage design. And while most remember the major shows like Ed Sullivan, few talk about their early performance at the Miss Black America pageant, where Michael stunned the audience with his vocals. It wasn't a global moment, but for many black families watching, it was deeply meaningful. Representation was rare on TV back then. Seeing young black boys on stage, shining with pride and talent, was a moment of cultural pride that went beyond music. There were also fun, lighthearted bits, like when Michael was caught sneaking candy backstage or cracking jokes with Diana Ross between takes. He may have been a rising star, but he was still a kid, trying to hold on to pieces of childhood wherever he could. 1969 was more than just a breakout year. It was a cultural reset. In a time when the US was still heavily divided by race, seeing 5 young black boys dominate television and radio was revolutionary. They weren't just singing, they were breaking barriers. For many black families, the Jackson 5 gave them something to be proud of. For many white families, they introduced a whole new level of appreciation for soul and Motown. And for kids everywhere, black, white, rich, poor, Michael became a symbol of what was possible. He didn't look like a manufactured product. He looked like one of them, just better. And that gave people hope. Maybe greatness could come from anywhere. Maybe it didn't matter where you were from. Maybe, just maybe, you could dream bigger. Michael Jackson didn't just entertain in 1969, he inspired. When we look back at 1969, it's easy to see it as the start of something big. But in that moment, in those first concerts, those early interviews, those wide-eyed stares on TV, we were watching history happen in real time. Michael didn't need time to grow into a star. He showed up ready. At just 11 years old, he had already taken over radio waves, topped the charts, and earned the love of millions. And the best part? He had no idea just how far he'd go. This was just the beginning. The world had only seen a glimpse of what Michael Jackson could do. Because if you thought 1969 was big, 1970 was about to explode. The Jackson 5 would go from rising stars to full-blown superstars. More #1 hits, more tours, more pressure, and more spotlight on Michael than ever before. So buckle up, because in the next chapter, the boy wonder becomes a pop phenomenon.